D.C. page. 2 million bikers to D.C. Jerry Boykin, one great American. Worth watching that video.
You know, if you can get Bill Cowan to do your commercial for you, you got to be something special. And certainly, Mr. Boykin is. All right. How many of you kept pace with the North Carolina Senate race? And maybe some of you decided that Mark Harris was the man for the job. We have a dynamic leader, a passionate preacher, tremendous visionary. Dr. Mark Harris has served as the senior pastor for the 3,200-member First Baptist Church of Charlotte since 2005. A native of Winston-Salem, Dr. Harris graduated from Appalachian State in 1987 with a bachelor's degree in political science. He answered God's call to the ministry that same year and enrolled at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina, where he would earn both his Master's of Divinity degree and his Doctor of Ministry degree in Christian leadership. His first pastorate was at Center Grove Baptist Church, just up the road in Clemens, North Carolina. As a gifted leader, Dr. Harris has served in many leadership roles in the local association, the North Carolina Baptist State Convention, and the Southern Baptist Convention. He served for a decade as a trustee of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary and on numerous committees and task forces. And during that time, he served on the Presidential Search Committee, as well as chairman of the board from 2005 to 2007. Most recently, Dr. Harris served as president of the North Carolina Pastors Conference in 2008. Dr. Harris ran for the United States Senate in 2014. I think we should give him a round of applause for that, just like for Heather Grant. That's a lot of commitment, and I saw it up close and personal. Talk about a man putting his heart out there, but continues to be involved by encouraging pastors across the state to utilize their platform and influence to be proactive in impacting our culture and nation for Jesus Christ. Dr. Harris and his wife, Elizabeth, live in Charlotte. They have 3 married children, Laura, John, and Matthew. Please welcome Dr. Mark Harris.
Well, good afternoon. We find ourselves here on this February Saturday in a beautiful, beautiful community of King, North Carolina. But it's also on this beautiful Saturday that we find ourselves here in the midst of a crisis that I'm convinced must be comprehended in one fundamental fact. It's a simple truth, ladies and gentlemen, that you and I can no longer take for granted in this nation very basic and very fundamental assumptions. Common ground, common sense, and understandings about our freedoms and how we exercise them are now eroded. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, you and I are not merely in a crisis that will determine the future of our liberty and our nation, but in fact, we're actually coming to the final moments of that crisis. You see, decisions are confronting us right now today in different parts of our country, including places like King, North Carolina, which are fundamental not just to freedom, but to civilization itself. What am I talking about? I'm talking about decisions that will determine in our generation the fate of future generations in our nation and in our world. You and I, students of history, know that America stood tall as the champion against all manner of evil in the 20th century. But if we sacrifice all that is essential in sustaining the moral foundations of our country, then our generation will have transformed the great power of this nation from a force of good into a far less powerful force in the 21st century. That's what's at stake. And please listen to me carefully. This will become our destiny if we do not succeed in mobilizing these communities like King, North Carolina, who mean to stand for the truth, who mean to stand for honor, who mean to stand against those who have declared war against God in our public life. So the question of the day and the question of this hour is, what are we going to do about it? See, I'm almost certain that we've all been part of those conversations, where we gripe and complain that the basic beliefs and the basic institutions and the basic rights are being assaulted and destroyed. And yet I've noticed more often than not, we simply gripe and complain while acting as if there's really nothing we can do about it. Unfortunately, I have to confess to you, as one who serves as a pastor of a church, that I've noticed that's particularly true of people who profess to be believers in Judeo-Christian law, in the Christian faith, and in the American way of life. Please listen to me, ladies and gentlemen. I still believe with all of my heart that it is the case that when you look at the polls, when you look at the ballot initiatives and the election results and so forth, that folks who believe in the right things to keep this nation in God's ways, we are still the overwhelming majority of Americans. And it's true. Look at the will of the people on the whole issue of same-sex marriage. 31 states allowed the people to vote, and 31 states voted that marriage was between a man and a woman. And in North Carolina, in May of 2012, just 33 months ago, as I remind the media, not 33 years ago, but only 33 months ago, voted 61% to 39% for marriage to be in our Constitution as between a man and a woman. Look at the majority of the people across this nation that are solidly against removing 10 commandments out of public life. Look at the majority of people who are solidly against taking prayer and Bible instruction out of our public schools. Look at the majority of the residents of King, North Carolina and Stokes County who are solidly against removing this monument in front of me. Attorney Matthew Staver has well stated, and I quote, he said, "Our constitutional makeup does not give the minority veto rights over the majority. Certainly the majority cannot trample constitutional rights, but the major political and social questions of our day have, by constitutional design, been given to the majority through the legislative process. Continually taking away the right of the majority to shape their culture will ultimately result in rebellion. After all, the give and take of the political process provides that the majority voice have final say on major sociological issues. To take away the right of people to debate the question leads to oligarchy and ultimately results in tyranny," end quote. You see, I've come to King, North Carolina this afternoon to tell you that the majority of Americans have been solidly against everything that has represented the divorce between this nation and its godly heritage. My father, my hero, World War II veteran, prisoner of war, father of 5, married to my mom for nearly 67 years. Throughout my life, he taught me, son, you need to stand for a few things. And I'd like to say that today, I've tried my best to stand for a few things. Chief among them is respect for Almighty God and His Word. I've sought to stand with thanksgiving for all that God has provided, for His blessings, His gifts, His power, and responsibilities that He's showered upon our nation. Also, in that respect for Him and His authority, I learned early on of a deep respect and commitment to the Constitution of the United States. As I've listened to the discussion and the debate at hand here in King, now over a number of years, I am told that somehow, in some way, we are to believe that this statue, this monument honoring Americans' heroes, a soldier kneeling at a cross violates the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. But I tell you, I've read that First Amendment. I've read it over and over and over again. And no matter how many times I read it, it still says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or respecting the free exercise thereof, period. I keep hearing this phrase, separation of church and state, in the discussion. And yet, when I read the First Amendment over and over and over again, I'm still yet to find those words anywhere in the First Amendment. Now, of course, any thinking person can read the First Amendment and see that there's a clear protection that's written in those words. In fact, the protection is critical to all of us who cherish religious freedom in this country. It was written so as to make sure that the federal government could not, let me repeat, that the federal government could not impose upon any state any uniform regime of religion. And as Ambassador Alan Keyes has stated, that includes the, quote, enlightened eradication of public religion in this country. He added, it said quite clearly not that there can be no religious establishment, not that there can be no God in politics, not that there can be no reference to religion in our laws. No, it didn't say that at all. It simply said that anything that had to do with these questions had to be decided by and was left in the hands of the states and the people of the states, free from interference by the federal government. Today, right here in King, North Carolina, you and I must awaken and recognize what is really taking place before us. Don't miss it. Don't miss it. All of the liberals in this country have tried to put us in a privacy box. For you see, in their worldview, the freedom of religion means, and I quote, freedom to privately believe as you choose. Well, I'm sorry, but that is not accurate to what we have in our First Amendment. I am sorry, but that is not even remotely adequate to what we've been promised in our First Amendment. No, I would submit to you that the free exercise of religion means that we have the right in our families and in our schools and in our communities and in our governments and in our states to live according to the Word of God, so we choose. If nothing else comes out of today, I believe all of us of faith, belief, and conscience, all those who stand on biblical truth, and all those who believe that we cannot live without the law and the rule of that God we invoke when we claim our rights. What must come out of today is that we all must stand and make it clear to the courts and clear to the Congress and clear to the mayors and clear to the president and to every power that exists that we remember what the freedom of religion is supposed to be. Not only that, but that we shall demand that we be granted again what the tyranny of the courts has sought to take from us, and that is the freedom to live in communities like King that are governed by the laws that reflect the beliefs of the citizens of King, North Carolina. When Major Dave invited me to come and be a part of this today, I, like many of you, maybe began to question what's really the need. I mean, seriously, the deed's already done. The votes of the town leadership, they've been taken. The monument, been removed. The left-wing group, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, They've taken their $500,000 out of your pockets in this community, and they're no doubt plotting their next community to be the victim to their strategy of removing any acknowledgement of God from the public. The insurance companies are no doubt considering and pondering this very day how to avoid having to pay out for such lawsuits due to a liability claim for acknowledging God. Well, I'll tell you why it's so important that you made the effort to be in King today. It's because that you understand in one generation how our nation has dramatically shifted. You get it. You get it, how we've gone from a nation who shared a moral vision based on Judeo-Christian ethic to a nation floundering in moral decay. You're here today because you get it, that we've gone from a nation which had lifelong marriages to the same spouse as a general rule to a divorce rate approaching 60%. You're here today because you get it, how we've gone from a nation where life was treasured and protected to now a nation with over 55 million babies executed in their mother's womb. You're here today because you get it, how we've gone from a nation where our public education produced the highest literacy rate in the world to a nation where great teachers are leaving because they're expected to parent at-risk kids without any morals or parental guidance. You're here today because you get it, how we've gone from a nation where Americans asked not what their country could do for them, but what they could do for their country, to a nation today where people simply demand their rights but refuse to own up to their personal responsibility. You see, I hope you're here today because you understand that none of these decisions or this current destructive direction will be corrected until we experience a true spiritual awakening in America. And that will mean a personal spiritual awakening for each individual under the sound of my voice. But it will also mean a national revival, which will require corporate action. As I leave here today with a heartfelt call to action, I present to you. Would you join me in making the commitment to the following things? Number one, we will rise up together and throw off this myth of separation of church and state. We must no longer sit by and watch godless activists run the nation into hell. Number two, will you commit to join me in praying without ceasing? Because we understand unless the Lord builds the house, unless the Lord builds the nation, all of our efforts will be in vain. Number three, will you join me in being willing to be the answer to our prayers as we stand for truth and righteousness in the public square? Number four, will you commit to join me in registering to vote and using your influence to get others registered and engaged in the process? Number five, will you commit to join me in getting informed on the issues, and I mean getting involved in electing leaders of character, consistency, and courage in our nation once again? And finally, will you commit to join me in coming together and joining together with all like-minded, God-fearing Americans and get over our fear of being political? Ladies and gentlemen, this monument, which honors our nation's heroes, once stood as a vivid reminder of the price of freedom. Political decisions were made, which led to the placement of this monument at one time, and political decisions led to its removal at another time. We better get over our fear, because politics is the system we live in, And may God grant us the wisdom and courage to know it's time to reclaim it and redeem it. May God bless you, and may God bless King, North Carolina.